Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Let's break down all of First Stand. I wanted to do like a shorter edited video, but it didn't pan out for reasons. So I'm going to just put my thoughts out there. I'm going to end with predictions, talk about the patches coming through, talk about, of course, the teams of the regions that I've watched, and a little bit on CFO. Let's get into it. Opera GX is partnered with, of course, Riot Games to bring you easy access to everything that you need to know and that you need to, of course, make your first time experience as good as possible. Here you can, of course, unlock the GX corner, the Riot corner. Here you have the full schedule, all the matches. You can click them, spoiler free, easy peasy. You can scroll down a little bit further and here all your favorite streamers are, XDD. You can scroll down, boom, who is this handsome fella with this beautiful cat? Click him. All the co-streamers are here. You can follow through. If you want to unlock it, all you need to do is get one of these beautiful mods. Right now, there's a lot of arcane-based ones. Let's see what we can pick out. Maybe let's do Echoes of Tomorrow. Boom, let's click it. Install mod, boom, just with a button press, we are in the mix, and I have, of course, unlocked the Riot Corner. The beauty of these mods is that everything is customizable. You have the background, you have the click noises, and if there's something that is to your liking or not to your liking, you can always just open the mod page. Boom, you can click the interface. You want to mix and match, you can do so. You can customize your browser to your own personal needs. Additionally, most browsers just try to keep you in a stranglehold to make sure that you never switch over, never do anything. Let me tell you how easy it is to free yourself of the shackles of browsers that are slow and just hold you down. You scroll down, easy peasy, and then boom, import bookmarks and settings. You choose your browser and then boom, import, and then rock and roll. And it is done. So make sure to use the link below to install Opera GX, and everything will just come preloaded. Unlock the extra content, the League of Legends mods, and all these features exclusive to Opera GX. Stay tuned for, of course, more updates, and thank you to Opera GX for powering this video. First time, patch 2505, the big one, of course, is the fact that the lane swaps are in, that I've already mentioned in other videos. In terms of how the meta might shift, I think we're going to see a lot of the similar champions around mid lane, a lot of similar champions in jungle. In AD, obviously, things are going to be more skewed towards Varus, Kalista, and Ashe, which are champions that are already played, right? But there is a bigger focus on, of course, the lane. You're going to see a lot less Kai'Sa, because Kai'Sa is, of course, a champion that wants to be in lane swaps and skip through that. So that is something you might, of course, just see less of, and that branches out to champions like Xayah and so forth. But melee support's still something that everybody enjoys. I think tanks top lane is something that you're going to see a lot less of, especially K'Sante, something that's been a staple because of how strong he is in lane swaps. His matchups in isolated 1v1s aren't that great. If you play K'Sante against Gnar, Rumble, then you're going to be, in a tougher spot. We saw a little bit of a downfall of Jace after the changes came through to him, but I do think a resurgence of Jace is very likely as well. And then the follow-up with champions like Jax, after champions like Gnar is out, and Rumble is out, and then like Camille, and it just opens up that pool. Everything the same, except, of course, tanks. Ambessa got a little nerf, K'Sante got a nerf too, Aurora got a little one too. I think Aurora is still going to be played in the same spots. Everything else is just pretty straightforward. I think Poppy change also matters to some degree, but I think that, Poppy, her big strength was just how her W functions against other melee supports, and the fact that she's super strong in, of course, early lane phase when it comes to playing a support. So there's that, they definitely reduced a lot of her early damage. And a big part, while Poppy was liked and Elise was liked too, is that in and out of lane swap, they were very good at diving. 3v1 dives, even 2v1 dives were very possible. So I do think that the prior Poppy, with this change, might be lowered. Skarner also got a little bit nerfed, but I think it will still be played just because of the power of this. Something that I can add as well is that unflinching now should be relatively useful, but it's hard to surpass overgrowth still. But I do think that this is a pretty solid buff against CC heavy teams, especially like if you're maybe a bot laner or you're laning against something that starts their combo with CC, and this can be a lot of effective health. Let's get into business. Let's talk about KC first. KC as a team, for those who haven't watched LEC this time around, LEC, KC, everyone talks about them as if there's some rookie team, which, they have two rookie players, but what's so unique about them is that in the LEC, they were the most disciplined and well kind of coordinated around objective play. They are very, very good at playing around objectives, and they rally around them super, super well. On top of that, the solo laners are very good at building up their economy. There's certain elements of their gameplay that can be attacked, but we're going to get to that a little bit later. Something I wanted to highlight is that as a team, in terms of how they drive home their early game, it's very Drake-centric. Them having prior bots is something that is fundamental to their gameplay loop. I do think that when they are playing Varos, as an example, when they have, of course, very, very strong presence in bot side when it comes to the lane phase, they take very, very good control over river. When they have control over river, they tend to have very, very good objective control, and then they can use Fog of War to, of course, pressure the enemy mid lane, which I think they do super, super well. Throughout this entire game that I have as an example, you can see that Yike and Targamas have full control over bot side river through, and through this they're going to get, of course, gank angles on to caps, which works out super, super well. So this is something to pay attention to. In games where they get attacked a little bit more in bottom side and they don't get the same kind of rhythm when it comes to the matchup, those games are definitely a lot more difficult for them. I do think as a point of concern when it comes to KC is how well they're going to lane bottom side. I think the Targamas and Kalista are fantastic players, but they are playing against bot laners with a lot of experience together and also a lot of experience in general. If you think about the bot lane pool, we have Eon, CodeJJ, who've played it together for a very long time, and CodeJJ, who has just a mountain of experience. And then you have, of course, Viper and Delight, some of the best players in their position. And then Crisp and Jackie Love as well. Once again, very, very experienced players. So it is going to be a big test for the KC bot lane to, work out the matchups as they play out, because there's definitely been moments where 2v2 bottom side, they do break. This was a game where they got 2v2 killed, and then that kind of pivoted and kind of built up into a dive. There's also the example of when they played, of course, the Zillion into Rakan, where bot lane kind of exploded, and those games were quite easy for Fnatic. So this is going to be a point that they need to, of course, provide cover for. But I highlight again, Yike, very, very good at finding Drake timers. I really, really like that they have big Drake focus, because making use of grubs in the current meta is quite difficult. You don't have a lot of windows to push, and you always need to rally around certain objectives. Building up for Soul Point seems to be just a winning strategy right now, unless you have very specific champions that can leverage grubs, because grubs have been nerfed a couple of times, and it requires quite an investment in terms of tempo to get them. Additionally, I can also highlight that grubs do give a lot of XP, so getting that level 6 advantage and leveraging that into something can also be super useful. But let's say you take the first Drake and you trade it for the first 3 grubs, and then you set up to fight the second grubs. Those 3 grubs and the investment into it isn't, of course, super fruitful. So you are opening a lot more options for yourself, and I like the fact that KC is so Drake oriented. I think they had a better Drake setup than any other team in Europe. Something that is so good about them as well, I would highlight, is how they team fight. I think that in regards to their gameplay around objectives and knowing which angles to play for and to play around, I think that they are doing things that are so damn sharp. Let me see if this is the replay that I was thinking about. This is the one. Take a look at Yike here in terms of how he executes this. This is a fight that is very, very losing for KC, and they are out of position, but I really like how they reposition and rally around the same things, and Yike finds this incredible angle to flash into Q onto Hansama, combos him, and KC recover a losing position. There are far more examples of this in terms of how they know the points to turn and how to play them out mechanically, which is so impressive, because the main concern for KC coming into this season is, Targamas doesn't communicate so much. They have Yike, who comes from G2, where a lot of things were kind of, viewed in a way that Yike has a silver spoon in his mouth, and then you have Kana, who is an import. But this is a team that has, great booming voices, and in terms of rallying around game concepts, they do this super well. I repeat, KC is by far the most disciplined team in the entire LEC, and that is going to be very, very interesting to see play out. In terms of KC's recipe for success, you can see the antithesis of it in terms of things that won't work is when they are playing tank, top lane, and they are, of course, playing range supports. It's not a question of them individually, not being able to execute on them. It's just more about KC as a team. They function the best when they have setup in the jungle position, setup in the Sopo position, which allows, of course, Kana to play his carries. This was a series where they struggled super hard, except that one game where they had followed that recipe with Vi and Alistar, and then Rumble top. And in the other games, we had a Sion game. We had a, of course, Ornn game here for Kana, which is very, very uncharacteristic, and KC recognizes. If you compare this to their series against G2 in the finals, it's very obvious that they recognize that they need to find carry top laners for Kana, set up in jungle and super position, fill in AD position to sometimes have setup, make sure that they have strong matchup, pick AD for the matchup, and then whatever mid laner is the strongest that is open, whether that's Aurora, Azir, Victor. The line in terms of which champion comes next is very, very obvious. If you see here as an overview, the matches that they do lose are the ones when the range champions come in, like the Seraphine, like the Zillion, like the Senna, like the Lulu, and when they have, the combinations with the Alastars and so forth, it becomes a lot easier for them to execute because it gives room then to, of course, Kana to play his carriers in the form of Jace, Ambessa, Gnar, Rumble. When it comes to the tanks, of course, his results have been worse. And the same thing for jungle, right? It's not that Yag necessarily doesn't play carries well. We know already from previous splits that it worked out super good when he played Graves and Lilia and so forth. But in terms of the result, it's very clear that, Yike has taken on a role very similar to Owner on, of course, T1. I think that he's very, very sharp on the smites, very good mechanically, and there's a lot of interesting things you can do still mechanically when you play Xin Zhao, Maokai and Vi, and of course Sejuani. It is a very, very akin to, of course, what Owner does for his team. It's not that he doesn't play all of these carry champions super well. There's just a clear preference to set things up because of who their top lane profile is. And finally, I think Kalis as a player, his range of champions are super impressive. I think that his switch up coming into the finals, playing the Ashe and the Jhin and the Varus was super cool. I do think that it's very important to be able to be ready to pick for the matchup, because a lot of these ADs here that are showing are picked for the matchup to set up your support for success. And I think that's going to be crucial, of course, as the meta shifts towards a more lane-centric meta where these champions are going to be locked a lot. So we will see if the bot lane is going to break new grounds. And the main concern for me, outside of how the bot lane will lane against the other teams, is KC have very little time to actually prepare for this tournament. They have no time at all. LEC finished last out of all of the competitions. Last. They had to fly in to, of course, Korea. They have to, get the solo queue counts. They do that late. They scrim late. They will have media. They will have jet lag. They will have very little time to actually digest the new patch and make adjustments. So they're coming into things quite dry. It is very possible that KC might have a slower start. They play against Team Liquid in the beginning, and that is an additional challenge because in terms of logistics, they definitely have a massive disadvantage over the other teams. Team Liquid flew out to Korea very, very early together with the other NA teams, so they are there available for practice. And Team Liquid, of course, they have a lot of players that are native to Korea. They're very used to the environment. They have everything set up already. They have bootcamp there for a week or two already. You have, of course, Hanwha Life. They don't need to move at all. They're basically playing in their own, arena that they used to in their own studio. The Chinese team can still practice against the Chinese teams and then just fly in late. Logistically, KC have the biggest challenge. So I'll be very, very impressed if they manage to overcome this. Definitely, I do think, though, KC is the third strongest team over Team Liquid. But if there's a reason as to why they might potentially lose to Team Liquid, it is because of this thing that I've mentioned. Because obviously, it's fearless, it's best of three, and on the day, your performance matters. Team Liquid is a team strong enough to potentially cause an upset. But I do think, if I'm adding one and one together, a concern of mine is KC's very, very short turnover time. So I'll be very, very impressed if they manage to stick the landing and perform really, really good from day one. Next in line, Hanwha Life, a clear favorite to win the competition. I think that in terms of roster building, How Alive is so impressive, right? In terms of roster building, it is just perfect. If you compare this alteration in comparison to the previous year, a big issue was when Viper had to pick champions for his lane, meaning like Misfortune, Jin, or so forth. They didn't have enough firepower to actually carry the game. Doran is a player that wants to be weak side function under very few resources, but if the enemy targets your AD in draft and you are put in positions where you drop 4-5 and you pick useless champions and you can't blind Zeri to just carry the game through bot, then of course you're going to be in trouble. And that's what's so beautiful about this How Alive. Similar to KC, the Light and Peanut are the ones that provide the setup on this roster. And then in terms of how they fill out, right? It's like usually when you pick a champion later in draft, you need this champion to scale super well into the enemy team because you see everything. You see 9 champions, you see sometimes 7 champions, right? You are picking something that is strong with your champions and against the enemy champions. It means that usually you're picking something that has a good matchup and at the same time scales super well into the game. And doing so from the AD carry position isn't always guaranteed. But now with Viper, Zeka, and Zeus as your lineup for carry players in the team, it is very easy for them to be in a situation where, oh, we're going to pick Ashe for the matchup. We're going to snowball through the matchup. And then Zeus will be able to find like a curveball on 5 that is going to carry the game through scaling, right? The more you see, it's like your champion's relation to the other ones, that is what scaling is. It's like how well will your champion interact against the other ones? We had these angles where we picked, for example, Gwen into the Ornn. This was a very late pick. The Olaf blind picks later on in draft against what the enemy showed against T1 and so forth. This is what makes How Alive so damn dangerous because it's very clear who the role players are and it makes a lot of sense to have them in the support and the jungle position. Doesn't mean that the other players can't provide setup as well, right? It's like Zeus still as a player has a mean ass Ornn, crazy good Gragas. They are just insanely complete as a team. Something that's super cool about How Alive's run is that they played so many damn series. Like you can say what you want about the format. I agree with you, it's complete trash. But looking at what How Alive had to go through, they had to play against T1, went to 5 games, play against Genji, went to 5 games once. They smoked down 1, went to 5 games, and then finals also went to 5 games. There is a statistic from Zeka. He straight up has won 9 game 5s in a row. Zeka is the clutch meister. There's varying degrees in terms of how much of an impact he has, but it is still important to highlight that How Alive definitely built up crazy strong resilience to get here in terms of what their journey is, right? You can say that for KC, you can say that for Top Esports that made it through the lower bracket. Team Liquid, due to their format, didn't have that many tough matchups, so to speak, They got all the way on into the finals, but in my opinion, I don't think they're, in terms of facing all of the teams, it's like they didn't play against Fly because it was a single elimination. They didn't need to go through some crazy gauntlet. They were always on, elimination point, besides, the best of 3 double elimination in the beginning, but there wasn't, a true test of fire, in my opinion. They literally just performed super well on one weekend, which was finals weekend, which is, fair play is very important. But the build up to that was kind of uninteresting, I think, with the LTA format. But back to How Alive. I think it's inside of their gameplay loop. I think something they do better than any other team in the world is recognizing which waves are important and playing on tempo. This is something that Delight and Peanut do so well. It's going to be very many circumstances where you just skip out on the mid wave when they have a tempo advantage, because a lot of players are going to walk on this mid wave that I'm highlighting here, and they're going to walk to push that because it's natural. But when How Alive recognize that they are a lot faster on the map and they base first, they do these plays where they overload and they gain so many big advantages off of that. In the end here, Keen is going to die, he has no Mordekaiser ult, and the enemy team is too late and they push one mid wave, but they're not going to break that tower because Kai'Sa had the tempo advantage because she based first. This is something that is so reoccurring. They beat FlyQuest like this as well. When you guys remember when they caught the Amumu and Urgot always on the Grumpy. I really like how they do this because Kai'Sa here also crosses straight into top side. Sejuani is crossing after pushing out, like coming from bottom side. They collapse onto the side and the enemy team is always on the waves and they find a lot of opportunities like this. They collapse, overload on one wave, and they don't give a damn if the enemy is going to waste tempo to, of course, hit mid turret. They can always collapse back after they made a very quick play. Another example here, what I wanted to highlight is just how good Zeus is. To me, Zeus is the best player in the world right now in terms of just League of Legends as a whole. I think that his pool of champions is absolutely immense. In a world where people said that top lane is unimpactful due to lane swap, I think that Zeus as a player has time and time again just managed his economy so beautifully in terms of knowing when to push, when to group, when to farm. He's been super, super good in terms of understanding lane swaps, which of course is no longer in the game. And then Zeus finds his fight opportunity so well, and then he always plays in the Zeus pocket. I think that Zeus now on this team together with Peanut and Delight, there's no longer this stress and tension where he needs to gamble in order to get farm. Peanut and Delight are very, very good at finding information in the game to make sure that Zeus no longer dies on side. T1 as a team, how they played always was that Owner was a very farm-heavy jungler. He was always the jungler that was like 200 CS on Vi, 3 items, and he was super impactful in fights. And then Kiria, if he played something mobile, could get vision down, but if he didn't, if he played like Leona, Poppy, Braum, they always struggled with the vision, and then Faker and Zeus had to take like risks and gambles to farm. And unless Faker was playing something super, super giga mobile like Ari or like something tanky like Galio or Azir, they got caught on side time and time again. But Zeus no longer dies on side, has an insane champion pool, and has his fight awareness, has his mechanics. There is very little flaws to Zeus. There is no flaws to Zeus. And that's why, to me, he's just the best player in the world, right? He's just the best player in the world. So many examples of his team fighting just being so damn brilliant. The range of his performances are incredible. And I think that this goes to say for the rest of the How Life players too. I think Zeka had a beautiful ramp up in playoffs. I think Viper had some moments where he was quite inaccurate. He had some games that were quite ugly. I remember Kaiser game, an Ezreal game. I don't think this has been like Viper's greatest split in his career, definitely. And I think Peanut is also a player that had like some really bad Zinzao games, bad Zyra games. But in terms of where you have players where they can always pick up slack, I feel like as long as 3 players on this team perform to their highest level, they can crack skulls. And that's why, to me, How Alive, if they manage to somehow, be in a position where they lose first hand, that would be just, there's no way to state how big of a disappointment that should be for a roster like How Alive. I think that Zeus, on his Olaf, found these beautiful fucking angles to fight. Just the idea of preparing for Fearless and being on blue side, in this discussion of why blue side is so OP, I think How Alive's conviction surrounding their blind picks and understanding what is going to cut through the draft is always, the thing that is going to give teams advantages on blue. I can highlight as well, right? It's like on red side, you have more options to counter the enemy, but as the tree branches out, right, in the conversation of how well will you play all the counters, because you don't know what the enemy is going to blind pick always. It's like, oh, the enemy blind pick Olaf. What is an answer into Olaf? Akali can lane well into Olaf, but then you're playing Akali. How much Akali did you play Doran? Is Akali good for a comp? We don't fucking know, because it's pretty fucking random, right? In isolation, it makes sense to pick against Olaf, but in reality, it's like, what are you really, really doing, right? So red side needs to react, and you need to be ready to react to so many other things than what you need to be ready for when you're on blue side, because you're just setting up your blind picks. And I wonder sometimes if red side should just take a blue side approach and just slam the strongest solo lanes possible as early as possible to make sure that you are safe, because here dropping 4-5 and getting Zoe is of course tough, which is something to pay attention to when it comes to Fearless. So How Alive favorite in the tournament, this is like a picture we already looked at. Let's talk about Team Liquid. The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is Mr. Umti. Umti has had, in terms of performances, I think it goes without saying that Umti is one of the weakest players to have qualified to an international event, with so limited teams, so like MSI or whatever, ever, in my opinion. The fact that Umti made it here is crazy. Let me give you guys the rundown of some of the craziest mistakes he did in, of course, the run-up for Team Liquid. Team Liquid struggled against the #1 seed out of LTA South. Simple things like Umti just eating a crab when they could have just walked out when Nash has been taken. Could have been an Angorai. Instead, Umti just eat a crab, putting his team into a fight position. Them getting aced here is obviously a big fucking tragedy. Let's continue. Another example. This one is also quite funny. The enemy team is, going into Nash area. Umti is trapping with Poppy. Not so sure why. He does it in this pocket. He wants to trap the Vi. He gets spotted. Vi ults his ult. He would have missed it anyway. And then Umti tackles him towards the pit. And Umti wastes his W already. So Vi can Q. And then Q, Vi smites it, which of course is just crazy of a sequence. Sure, if this happens once or twice, that's fine. Some mistakes happen. But the montage of Umti's mistakes, game-losing mistakes, are just far too many. Even in the same game here, we have Umti just getting caught when his team is, hovering into topside. Umti getting killed here because he was spotted on, I believe, Ashe E. And then we continue. It gets worse. The enemy is collapsing into bottom side. They are looking to kill the wave, and they're going to look to push with their Nasher. This one doesn't show it, actually. Somehow this highlight video wanted to hide what happened. But take a look at what Umti does here after he spawns, after getting caught, the way I just showed. Take a look at this. Umti just steps into the enemy team. They're showing on the wave here, and then he gets spotted, gets fire ulted, and then once again he dies for no apparent reason. His team tries to push in mid and brutal bases. I do think that Team Liquid, the rest of them should base, but Umti dying here, of course, gives the enemy the opening to commit all the way and then look for end, because obviously they're being outnumbered against the Soul and, of course, the Nashor. So there's that. Let's take a look at some more.
So far, though, because there's been so many
here, walking into topside, standing on vision, very, very bad awareness, just goes into the bush, dies after losing flash from before, let's continue.
Perfectly if you're hitting
this one is also crazy, It's like there's a YamatoCannon setup starting. Drake is on in 20 seconds. The enemy is going to soul point. He just face checks into this space with no vision, loses all of his HP before the objective even spawns. Umti has to flash out, and then of course the enemy team gets a massive opportunity. Keep in mind, these are games that Team Liquid managed to win, even when Umti plays like this. He's just face checking, pretending that he's Sejuani, which is probably the only champion he should be put on. And then, of course, here finally tries to go for some desperate kind of smite, but Quid just eats him and Ayla bites him. And there we go, YamatoCannon is gone. I repeat, Team Liquid managed to win this game in the end, but not because of Umti. This one is also quite hilarious. This is probably my favorite one. Let's take a look at this one.
damage.
So here, a fight is going on, plain and simple. Just pay attention to what Skana does here. So he places Herald in before the objective, fine. Look at this flash here. He flashes, Ease, does a circle, does a pirouette, pushes Busio into his team. And then Azir, reactionary, wants to ult Busio away, but Umti said, "Get on my sting, motherfucker. I want to end my teammates." Take a look at this one. He ults them in, and his whole team gets cooked. His whole team gets cooked. Enemy Scanner. For those players out there that always say Scanner is OP, don't get me wrong, I don't disagree, but requires a little bit of finesse. So Team Liquid, the rest of Team Liquid, the main thing for me to highlight is that the removal of lane swaps, I do think, is something that is going to hurt them. Because I think in terms of macro and how they set things up, when they are playing together as a team, I do think that they have a lot to offer. I think their teamfight execution of where to position looks very, very rough unless APA is playing the usual champions that you know him for. So let's say the Nico, the Aurelion Sol, the Ziggs even, and Talia. I think these are the ones that stand out to me as his best champions, unless Corki can be played mid or Tristana. And this is something that teams are going to target. I think that APA looks like a completely different player when he plays them. And throughout the split, we could see him test out Azir and Aurora and Galio even, and it looked very, very ugly. Don't be fooled by the win ratio, because in terms of how the bracket was built, they did play against teams that are just straight up weaker than them. I think APA, if it wasn't for how bad Umti played in a lot of these games, I think APA would have gotten a lot more flack. So maybe Umti just did that to keep APA safe. But APA also had quite the rough split unless he was playing on the APA Classics. So in terms of how Fearless pans out, it was lucky that the series that they played against 100 Thieves ended after 3 games, right? Because I do think deeper they go, the more these champions get targeted, I do think they can be hurt. Something that teams have tried to do is target Umti's champion pool, but I think that there is very little champions that he performs super well on, and I think it's better to just target APA in terms of his champion pool. I think the biggest, most dangerous weapon that Team Liquid have is their bot lane. They had this cute Zara Varos angle they prepared into Renata. GoJJ is a player with a wide range of champions, and when it came to the finals weekend, he played so damn good. I think Yeon has been the best performing player on this team for a very long time. I think Yeon is absolutely insane, and I think that this team lives and dies by all the tempo and the pressure that this bot lane creates. They like to pick later in draft, and I think that they are very good laners. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Zeri angles, the Rushinami angles, the Varos bot lane angles. I think that they have a very good range of champions that they play, and this is by far their biggest strength. I think Impact is, of course, a very tenured player with a lot of great experience, and I think that his champion pool was very tuned towards champions that were very effective in lane swap. So this is something that Impact is going to be tested on. But if there's anyone that can switch up his gameplay quickly, is a player like Impact, in terms of his experience. But I do think players around him that he's playing against, 369, Kana, and of course Zeus, should be more effective than him in this meta. I think that he has some cheeky counter picks like the GP and the Mordekaiser that he will have a edge on. But the fact that Kesante is going to be a lot weaker could be something that hurts them. Tanks in general being weaker is something that could hurt Impact at this tournament, because he's going to be playing that isolated 1v1, and the conditions you set up are going to be very important for the game. So I think that if there's one team that stands out as a team that is hurt the most by the removal of lane swap, I do think that is Team Liquid. But the main thing that I think should be highlighted here is that their coaching staff is very good at hiding the weaknesses of this team. And I think over time, Team Liquid's weaknesses are revealed. And the question is, because KC versus Team Liquid, they played the first round, the main question will be, how will, of course, these teams, just play up against each other, because of the concerns I had about KC. I do think KC have better mechanical play, a better well-rounded team, better suited for a non-lane swap meta, a much better mid laner in my opinion. I do think they should be better, but maybe just because it's the first best of 3, maybe Team Liquid can cook something up strategically to hide all of their weaknesses, because this is something that they've done so massively the entire last year. This is a team that likes to put in the repetitions and the same combos over and over again and have a very clear game pattern in terms of how they play out. But if that gets disrupted, I do think that Team Liquid should be weaker than HLE, KC, and of course, Top Esports. All right, Top Esports. Top Esports, for those who have watched Top Esports only internationally, they think, oh, this team is just, choke city, because the last best of 5 that they play always looks so ugly, whether it was the one against G2 at MSI, or of course the one against T1 at Worlds. There are certain series that look very ugly for Top Esports. It was also the same regionally last year. But this year, this team looked very different. I think it's important to highlight the story that they've been through. Top Esports started in the lower bracket. Their group run that wasn't super impressive, and they had to run the whole gauntlet. They beat everyone 3-1. They beat IG, NIP, Bilibili, JDG, and finally AL. I think the key thing to highlight, right? I thought that 369 and Jacklove as players were on a downtrend, and I didn't think slowly. I thought they're going to not be able to recover, but it's very clear that they have found form again. I think a big thing to highlight is Top Esports acquisition in the coaching department. They acquired and this guy is just a legend in the LPL, plain and simple. He was a part, of course, the legendary JDG runs, especially the one in 2023. He took a hiatus in 2024 and then joined Top Esports, and this just seemed to have revived everything. A very common trend here is that the teams with great coaching staffs have made it here. KC can, of course, be included in that, because Now in Fearless, it seems to be more important than ever. And Top Esports have very, very good draft reads. I think that these players in 369 and Jakilov have found a kind of a renaissance in terms of their individual performance, which is super cool. And of course, he is reuniting with players that he worked with in JDG in the past, in Kanavi and 369, and this is working out beautifully. In terms of describing Top Esports as a team, I would say that, their biggest strength is also their weakness, is that they are very, very trigger happy in terms of taking fights. They play a very, very high-paced game, and they're going to be able to, they take opportunities wherever they see them. And when they play against teams that are not capable of calling them out on their bullshit, they kind of, it's very, very tough to beat Top Esports. Very, very tough. I think that in terms of how they approach fights and opportunities they take very little stock of game state, and they just look at angles and opportunities. And I think that in terms of how they play with information, they judge real-time kind of a risk assessment of, only this person is showing the distance from the other players, even if they're in fog of war. Maybe there's a pocket here where we can one-shot someone and kill somebody, and they do so time and time again. It's like Top Esports, regardless of game state, are looking for these opportunities where, while this is a potential weak side, is there are moments where, let's say economically, it's like, they can reach IE here, they can get more farm, they can reach a point where the fight is going to be a lot easier. Maybe they can wait for a flash, maybe wait for something else. They don't do so, right? They just play on feel a lot. And with this, right, if you are approaching the game like this, especially in the LPL, it means that the angles and how you execute fights is going to be so damn sharp. The angles that Top Esports is going to be finding is going to be better than anybody else on this team. But that comes at a great risk of looking foolish and taking fights that just look damn ridiculous, while everyone else is going to operate with a higher sense of precision, right? I think that in terms of how Alive approach things, it's very clear that they just make sure to dominate side, find good angles to group, and rally around key spells. They play a very disciplined approach. KC the same way. Team Liquid try to be the same way, right? While Top Esports are very, very snappy, and the structure to how they set up fights isn't like super, super clean, but through that, they find opportunities that a lot of other teams would miss. So in order to defeat Top Esports, you need to have stability and discipline, of course, but also you need to keep up. Like if the enemy is taking fights that are inherently bad for them, but they are more ready for them, you're going to be defeated because you weren't ready for them, right? You're not reacting appropriately to the over-aggression of the enemy. And this is going to be a very unique scenario for, of course, a team like KC, because regionally, teams aren't that super, super high pressure. If anything, it is like Fnatic that is that team. And there were moments where they struggled against that level of aggression. But Fnatic definitely often overreached and lost sights of how to fight. But I think with players like Top Esports of their caliber, a player like Cream, Jakilov, 369 Kanavi, these guys are very, very capable of showing game-winning mechanics. Someone I want to highlight more is Cream as a player. He's definitely like the key player for this team. I think that he raised the floor the entire time, and also the ceiling of this team, the entire winter split, because his teammates around him didn't perform great all the time. It took some time for them to warm up to things, and through that, I do think that Cream carried. I think Cream as a player did what Vladi did domestically, but he did it in the LPL. Vladi was a consistent rock with a great range of champions, beating out Caps and Humanoid, which would be the equivalent of what Cream did, beating out Knight and like Rookie and Doinby, right? Cream has a wide range of champions who plays the majors, and he's at the same time just a melee specialist, right? If he gets good angles for the Silas, Akali, and Yon, he is the type of player to carry, akin to Zeka. Cream was a little bit green last year in terms of his international performances. I do think he played really damn good at EWC, right, when they beat Genji. But Cream is right now, fulfilling the promise of what was promised last year. So really, I think there could be an argument for even viewing him as the #1 mid laner coming into this tournament. But I have a great appreciation for Zeka as a player because he went through the mid lane gauntlet, which is the LCK. He beat Showmaker, he beat Faker, he beat Chovy. Like, these names are just echoing heavier in my mind and in my heart when it comes to how impressive it is to stand out as the best mid lane at the end of things. So the clash between Cream and Zeka is going to be super hype because, of course, both of them are melee specialists that are capable of so much more. Some of their gameplay patterns, I can highlight some of the angles that they find and to just put some kind of visualization on the things that I talked about. Let me find the right replay. This, for example, in terms of like the structure, right? In terms of the structure to this fight, it's like Jackilov is isolated and the enemy is the one grouped up and they have big push control. Usually I'd be like, oh, I don't like this type of setup. Ale is the one that is a little more disciplined, but Top Esports, in terms of their trigger finger and how they send things and how they find their angles, it's just kind of clean. It's kind of smooth. Everyone reacts to information real time, which is something that requires a lot of mechanical skill to do, because relying on a structure is something that is more consistent, but there is a high level of gameplay in finding opportunities like these. This is very, very hard to teach when it comes to team building, right? Let's take a look at some more. This is also like a very, very beautiful angle, like an instant snap onto the Wukong that used W. Crisp is just posturing forward, trying to gain information. It's like already here. It's kind of wild what Crisp is doing. He's trying to posture into the bush and trade HP for it as Jace is hitting the bot wave. He edges in and Leona doesn't snap ult, and then boom, they turn on Wukong. Everybody reacts to the information that Crisp is finding. And it looks like, in a lot of cases, players like Crisp, players like Mickey will look like they're inting while they're doing this if the reaction isn't appropriate from their teammates. But when it is, it just looks genius, right? It just looks genius. And there's certain levels to this, right? It can also look ugly. I do think that I have an example here where things can look ugly. It's like Top Esports here, the relation to what the game state is. It's like, look how weak Jackilov is here. They are playing against a composition that's super strong. It's like when Top Esports fall behind, they keep fighting in hopes to come back. And if they don't, they lose very, very fast. This is an example of Chris, like Top Esports, just posturing for a fight that doesn't make a lot of sense. I would say this is just crazy talk, right? They can't even contest the dig bush. They get pushed out. And then in the end, they just got barreled and they've invested so much time and then they decide to fight back, try to get something. But obviously they just lose the game off of this. So the double-edginess of their approach is something that is not necessarily 50-50, because they're obviously more trained than the other teams in this type of an approach. So they're going to find opportunities where other people don't. But in that, they can also look very, very silly. I don't think that it makes sense to underestimate Top Esports as a team. I think their roster is really, really damn strong. And there is a world where they could upset How Alive at this tournament if anyone would. But it's also the team that could lose against KC and, of course, a Team Liquid on a bad day because of the lack of structure to things. So everything is very, very feeling based and mechanics based. But this is a very, very formidable roster, and I really, really want to highlight is like Cream and Kanavi are playing some damn good fucking League of Legends, because I know a lot of viewers out there aren't watching, of course, LPL. Another thing to highlight as well in terms of how they approach the mid game, they rally around Cream. Their support jungle always make sure the Cream can push forward and farm and to isolate him and to make sure that he generates gold. So that is something that is, they play their mid game super well, but it's also predictable. So it is an angle where maybe teams are going to do the How Alive angle where they skip the mid wave, send their AD towards, of course, the Cream lane and find a fight 3v4 while Jackilov is on mid wave. This is something that definitely can happen. Finally, we could talk about CFO. I do think that CFO, like I've only watched a couple of best of fives that they played, like kind of half-assed. So take, of course, this information with a grain of salt. The main thing that I feel about the LCP as a region is that in terms of macro ideas and farm distribution and how they pressure for tier 2s and how play for jungle camps, it is not the greatest. It is not the greatest. But in terms of Drake setups and team fight executions, in terms of mechanics, this is a fight that is damn good. Like this is a team that can really mechanically perform. Like in terms of their team fight execution and where they are at mechanically, I think this team is very, very interesting. I think they're kind of similar to how I would view, let's say, 100 Thieves. For those who have watched 100 Thieves, they're like, they click the same button, same screen, they fight and they go hard. I think the Junjia does a good job of driving their early game, but in terms of how they manage their side lanes and how they can, like if they're textbook overgroupers. And if you're aware of this, you can definitely find moments to build a stronger economy. And if you choose your fights very carefully, you can out-macro a team like this. But if you are forced to be in those fights, if you're forced to be on Atakan, forced to be on Dragon, this team can be very, very, very dangerous. So I don't want to sell these guys short, but I have to admit once again, I haven't watched too much LCP, and so I'm just giving you a nugget of information. So looking at, of course, at the coming matchups that are up, that you can just catch on my first stand, just to give you guys some quick predictions. Team Liquid versus KC. I think KC is the better team over Team Liquid. I think KC is just much better. But I'm concerned about the prep time and the jet lag and all that jazz. So, I think everything is going to come down to draft. I think reading the draft is going to be super important. But I do think KC have a better range. I think it's important that they target APA's champions, no matter how useless Vladi is going to tell you that they are. Just ban the Ziggs out. Don't give him the angles. You can counter Nico, no problem. Aurelion Sol is not that big of a deal. But throw him off his comfort. He looks like a different player when he has to play Azir or whatever the fuck. So I hope KC invests into that and make sure that they challenge them in the jungle department when it comes to champions that, require execution. I hope they stick to the recipe and they follow through on the things that they showed in regular season. And then I think they're going to beat them. Tobies versus How Alive. I do think How Alive is going to win. Then CFO versus KC. I think KC is going to win. Team Liquid versus Topies. I think Topies was going to win. You guys know already the trend. I think that KC is going to be the 3rd seed. And then I think How Alive will be the 1st seed. Topies was the 2nd seed. And then TL 4th. And then in the end, I think KC will play against Top Esports in a best of 5, which will be very, very challenging. But KC has managed to break new ground already in the LEC. I didn't expect them to beat G2, and I definitely didn't expect them to fuck up G2 so hard that, they're questioning the whole life and everything that they did leading up to that finals. They got broken and chewed and spit out. KC will have to break new ceilings and be better than they were, which is a great challenge in itself, but they've managed to do so far, so who's to say when to stop? I expected them to be 3rd place at max, in the winter split. I thought that communication-wise they're going to suffer, but none of that is true, right? They are very disciplined and they are capable of breaking new ceilings because mechanically they're definitely there, and the energy of everything that we see in terms of, backstage and how they work, the energy is just right. So I'm super, super excited to have KC at this tournament, and KC versus Top Esports in the end is going to be giga hype. So there's that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was a little bit of a longer video, but when Yamato starts rambling, that's how it goes. So there's that. Yeah? All the best to all of you. Bless you and bless your face. If you sneeze during this video, catch you on the next one. Peace.